Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. We have on the show Stephen Street. He is the Inspector General for the entire state of Louisiana. Mr. Street's going to tell us what his position entitles him to do, which is basically investigate any allegations of fraud or criminal conduct in the executive branch of the government. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Stephen Street. Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show today Stephen Street. He is the Inspector General for the entire state of Louisiana. Stephen, thanks so much for being on the show today. Stephen, tell the folks a little bit about yourself, your employment history, your educational background, your professional history.
I've been a lawyer for coming up on 20 years. Let's see, I graduated in 1989 from LSU Law School and have been involved in criminal justice pretty much my whole legal career. I went to work for the Third Circuit Court of Appeal on the criminal staff. Pretty much straight out of law school, did that for 2 years, and then came back to Baton Rouge and opened up a private law practice doing mostly criminal defense work. Around 1995, I began working for the East Baton Rouge Public Defender.
That means you tried a lot of murder cases.
Yes, murder, capital murder, all the way down to your basic shoplifting type cases. Got a lot of great trial experience doing that.
Nothing like working on
That's right, and also worked at the time worked with people like Tony Marabella, for instance. Who now Judge Marabella, right? We worked together trying cases in federal court. Got a lot of great experience there. And that led to an opportunity to run the Attorney General's insurance fraud unit.
You guys are going after a lot of folks hot and heavy because a lot of Katrina fraud claims.
Lots of that work. So I did that for about 8 years. And then when Governor Bobby Jindal got elected, he gave me a phone call and asked if I would consider being the new State Inspector General, and I was very honored to accept. It's a job that falls right in line with what I've been doing for nearly 20 years.
Stephen, explain to the folks what the Inspector General's office is. It's relatively young, I think instituted by Governor Romer, so explain to the folks what it is.
In 1988, Governor Buddy Romer signed an executive order creating the office of the State Inspector General. Now, that at the time was designed to investigate all sorts of government waste and abuse in the executive branch. And that office...
Meaning the governor's office.
Meaning basically the governor's office and everybody under him. That includes, let me just talk about the executive branch for a minute, because it's much bigger than people realize. It involves the governor, it starts with the governor, but it also includes all the statewide elected officials, which would include the lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, commissioner of agriculture, just right on down the line, and then all of the cabinet level agencies, like just for example, exactly, revenue, natural resources, wildlife and fisheries, coastal restoration. Just there's any number of them, and they're listed on the LA.gov website that you can go look at. But it also includes all the boards and commissions. There's about 500 of those. And it also includes all of the public colleges and universities. So that's
quite a job.
Absolutely. It's a very broad amount of agencies. And the IG's job, or IG for short, Inspector General's job, is to kind of be a watchdog for the executive branch and make sure that taxpayer dollars are being not only wisely used, but we're supposed to look at fraud and abuse and corruption and that sort of thing.
So you're making sure it's not happening, and if it is, you go after them.
That's right. And so that office existed for nearly 20 years under executive order. And
that just changed.
Then that just changed. That's right. It changed with my coming in and with the governor's office and the new legislature that is really determined to make this a priority.
And frankly, the reason is because 50% of the legislative body, we had turnover in the legislature.
That's correct.
And the governor's made it a big plank, and so has that legislature for ethics reform.
The governor knew that in order to change the atmosphere here for business, that one of the first things to do is to reform ethics so that folks across the nation will realize that Louisiana is serious about doing business the right way and encouraging people to come here and relocate business.
Frankly, I've spoken to several of our legislatures here in East Baton Rouge Parish, and the federal government's sending billions of dollars because of the hurricanes, but they're leery to send it without controls because of the history of our state of abuse.
That's correct. The jokes are no longer funny, as the governor has said. We want to get serious about showing people that we really want to do business in an ethical way and with integrity. And I think that the governor has gone a long way. During the first special session, we passed historic ethics reform legislation that sent us from near the bottom of the public integrity rankings to now a solid #1. And one of the things that was passed in that ethics reform session was the Inspector General statute. And what that has done is to make the office permanent under law, which means it can no longer be abolished with the stroke of a pen.
By the governor.
By the governor. And the second thing is that the statute provided the necessary tools to be effective.
And please explain that to the folks, because prior to this new statute, the enactment of it, the Inspector General's office really didn't have a whole lot of teeth.
Well, what it had was the authority of the governor's office, and that's essentially it. And of course, now that's no small thing. You know, when the governor picks up the phone and says you need to cooperate.
This gives you litigation tools.
That's right. And what it does, well, first of all, it provides us with subpoena power.
Explain to the folks what subpoena power is.
A subpoena is a legal document that entitles us to request records or testimony from people, and they have to comply under court order or go in front of a judge and explain why they can't comply and possibly be held in contempt of court if they refuse to obey that.
So that empowers your office to demand the production of documents and also take depositions. Now, did I understand that before you can take the depositions, you have to get approval of the court?
I do. I have to go and apply to the judge of a 19th Judicial District Court and explain why we need the subpoena. And the judge, within 72 hours, has to rule one way or the other. Yes, you can have it, or no, you can't. And then once we get that subpoena, it'll be served on whatever party it's directed to, whether it be for testimony or for records production.
Now, what happens if the judge doesn't grant it within 72 hours? Is it automatically granted?
The statute doesn't really say that, Locke, and honestly, we're still in the very fledgling stages of this. What I should say first is that the subpoena is often a last resort. That's an authority that I have, but the statute directs all agencies to cooperate. It uses the word shall. Cooperate and provide all reasonable assistance. That's correct. They're required under law to cooperate with us, and furthermore, the statute designates the Inspector General's office as an authorized agent of any agency that or entity that we are investigating. And when I say entity, that can include contractors, subcontractors, and grantees.
So we're talking about anyone that deals with the state.
That's correct.
Okay, let's continue this on the next Legal Lines. This is Legal Lines with Locke Meredith and the State Inspector General, Stephen Street. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, pleased to have on the show Stephen Street. He is the Inspector General for the State of Louisiana. Stephen, again, thanks.
Thanks.
We were talking about the fact that the Inspector General's office is a part of the executive branch, and is to basically investigate the executive branch for fraud or any misuse.
That's correct.
What is the investigating body for, say, the legislature?
Well, the legislature has the legislative auditor, Steve Terrio. He's got a staff of a couple of 250 people that are auditors, investigators, and all sorts of things. And they are obligated by law, actually, to do audits yearly of municipalities and government entities like sheriffs and DAs and that sort of thing. And they pretty much go across a broad spectrum of different sorts of government entities.
Do y'all have overlapping jurisdiction?
Occasionally that will occur, but Steve and I have really tried hard to work together to make sure that we don't go behind one another. His staff is very competent, and they do a fine job, and so we really don't want to go behind and make sure that they've properly investigated.
Do they have different tools or additional tools?
Their tools are very similar to what we have. In terms of, they do have the ability to subpoena folks, and now what they have to do is go in front of the Legislative Audit Advisory Council, which is made up of members of both houses of the legislature. So if they want to get orders, and
so they don't go to a judge.
They don't go to a judge. They go to that council, okay. And the council is kind of their check and balance.
Now, what other agencies do you deal with? The feds, the Department of Justice?
A lot of it's going to depend on the nature of the investigation, Locke. Sometimes if we have a case that involves criminal implications, we just recently did one of those. We have investigative authority, but we do not have arrest powers. And so what we'll do is engage the assistance of a criminal investigative agency, such as the Attorney General or the state police, or perhaps even the FBI, depending on the nature of the case. And we have specific authority under our statute to conduct joint investigations with those agencies.
Let's talk about the size of your staff, because it's amazing the jurisdiction and the folks that you're supposed to kind of keep an eye on. How many folks?
Well, we have a total, I've got 3 vacancies right now for compliance investigators. Those are going to be folks with law enforcement background. When I fill those, I'll have a total of 16.
All right.
That'd be including me.
And the legislative auditor has hundreds?
They've got, I believe, 250.
What is the reason for the disparity?
Well, I think that part of the reason is that the Inspector General is just now getting back on the public radar. A lot of people, before we came into the picture, I think, like I said, it doesn't have anything to do with me individually. It has to do with a governor and a legislature that have now decided to make this a priority.
So it's kind of, it's a growing agency.
Absolutely it is. And we are taking on the responsibility, and hopefully in the future the legislature will give us the tools that we need to continue to effectively combat this.
And obviously the governor's office and the legislature seems to be supporting your
absolutely
agency.
So far it's been wonderful. It's great to have their support.
All right, let's talk about the process. Who can make a complaint to the Inspector General's office?
Anybody can make a complaint. Any citizen, any state employee, anybody that wants to, and they can do it either giving their name or they can do it anonymously. And there's any
that's not required.
Absolutely, giving their name is not required. People can make complaints on the internet. We have a website that allows for anonymous reporting.
How do you just type in Louisiana Inspector General?
Right. Well, you can type it in on the internet. Right. Just Google it, Louisiana State Inspector General. It'll come right up. And there's a section on the website that says file a complaint. You click on that.
Just got a little form or
something. Gives you a complaint form. You fill it out. You have the option of giving your name or not.
Or you could call, I guess, by phone?
You can call by telephone. You can fax it. You can walk in.
So any form of communication.
That's exactly right.
Now, what about state employees? I imagine they're a little nervous about disclosing some concern they have. How are they protected?
Well, state employees clearly are often in the best position to know about fraud and corruption. And there is very strong whistleblower protection for not only state employees, but pretty much any employee that comes forward with complaints about this sort of thing.
And that's an important point, because you were describing earlier the fact that I guess if you contract with the state, if you're a private company and you contract with the state, the contract mandates that they basically have open doors and open books to you guys?
That's correct. And the legislative auditor usually. But not only by statute, but usually in the contract they have a clause that says that they're consenting to that sort of thing.
So to get access to the state funds, they got to
That's one of the conditions.
Accountability.
That's one of the conditions of doing business with the state. And so with the whistleblower protection, Locke, they've even amended it in the first special session now to make it illegal to even threaten to retaliate against an employee for bringing a complaint forward.
So what are the penalties if it's violated?
There are civil penalties, which means that they can be fined, and it can provide a cause of action under state law.
I guess that's the way I'm going.
That's right.
So what if the agency or the individual gets fined? What about me
What they
who
can
loses
do,
his job?
they can be reinstated to their position with back pay, and there's penalties that are associated with that. And there's
do they just get their pay back, or do they get rewarded for putting their neck on the line with some kind of compensation?
And that, honestly, there are many details about that statute that, as far as the remedies go, that I may not be familiar with but I can pull it off the shelf and look at it.
So if anybody has a question about that...
Absolutely, but I can say this, that it is now illegal to even threaten to retaliate. So if somebody's punished on the job, if they're disciplined, if they're given a hostile work environment or fired, terminated, they will definitely have the ability and protection under the law. The legislature wants people to feel free to come forward without fear.
So at a minimum, they get their job,
Absolutely.
keep their job.
They can get their job back, they can get back pay, they can get, and there's other penalties under the statute.
Okay. Let's talk about the process. So somebody calls up, or they email or whatever, and they communicate a concern. What does the Inspector General's office do with that?
Well, we have staff that's investigators and auditors that will screen that complaint initially, and what we're looking for specific information of
So it needs to be
misconduct.
factual, not
That's right. It needs to be
I
factual,
think, or anything.
and it needs to be specific. Sometimes we might get these very general complaints that say, well, this guy that works at LSU, or these people at LSU, or wherever it ends up being, are doing something wrong. Well, that's not enough. We need to be able to have some specific place to go to try to investigate things. So we're looking for specificity, and we're looking for the areas that we're charged under the statute with investigating, which is fraud, corruption, abuse, mismanagement, waste.
And the bottom line is you've got limited resources, so you can't deal with every single
We have to
complaint.
prioritize what we look at.
So what are you looking for?
Well, we have a mandate from the governor, and we believe from the legislature and from the people, the citizens.
Because that's how they got there.
That's right.
That's how they got elected.
Fraud and corruption are at the top of our list, and those credible complaints of fraud and corruption are going to be at the top of the pile to be assigned for thorough investigation.
And then do you rank them in terms of severity, a monetary amount versus...
Usually. Sometimes if it's a monetary amount, if it's a large dollar figure, and if it's ongoing misconduct where the public is continually being injured, we'll look at that.
Let's continue with how you process a complaint on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines, Stephen Street, the Inspector General for the State of Louisiana. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, pleased to have on the show Stephen Street. He's the Inspector General for the State of Louisiana. Stephen, again, thanks. We were talking about the process. If somebody suspects fraud or an ethical problem, they contact your office, they give an information, they give a complaint, you guys evaluate it, you decide it's significant. What happens next? Investigators send out?
That's right. Well, in every case it can be different in terms of what is required to properly investigate it. Sometimes we'll go out and interview all of the different pertinent witnesses. Many times we like to gather as much information as we can outside of the agency, and that way when we go in to interview people, we're equipped with the proper knowledge to be able to evaluate what they're saying.
Do you interview them under oath?
Yeah, but sometimes we do, and sometimes it depends on whether it's necessary to do that. Oftentimes it is necessary to put somebody under oath to kind of impress upon them the necessity to tell the truth. That's right.
So you investigate, you collect the evidence, and if you decide based on that investigation this dog walks, what do you do next?
Well, then what we do is once the investigation is complete, and we try to wrap that up as fast as we reasonably can, but we've got to be thorough and professional and vet it all out. But we'll prepare a report that will eventually be publicly issued. And what the way that works is when we get a report in draft form, we almost always will send it to the agency being investigated or the entity and allow them to have a fair opportunity to respond to whatever's in it. When they send their response in, we usually attach that to the report, and then we send it on to the governor.
And you sign off on it? Is there some significance to that?
I sign off on it, and when I sign it, that means it's ready to go to the governor, and the governor reviews it, and he'll usually put his signature on it. He doesn't change the content or anything like that. He just will say, I agree, I'm signing this.
Acknowledge he's received it.
Right, and that's it, and then we release it publicly. And what that's designed to do, Locke, is to kind of inform the public of what was the investigation, what we investigated, and what the conclusions were. It's all about shining the light on the stuff that we
I've noticed that that's actually a distinction that's just been made recently. Before, I guess it couldn't be released till the governor signed. Now it actually can be released just when you sign.
Well, there's a legislation that is pending currently that has passed the Senate unanimously, and it's heading over to the House, which clarifies what a final report is. And because that's a question, we actually have a criminal statute that makes it illegal for me to publicly release any part of a report until it's final. So what this new statute actually will clarify that, and it would make it final upon Inspector General's signature. But we still...
That just seems appropriate. It avoids the appearance that the governor's kind of controlling it.
But we still send that to the governor anyway, because we think it's a good thing for him to put his endorsement on it as well.
And so y'all send it to the agency or the contractor or whoever, and they get a chance to respond. Goes to the governor, he signs off, it's made public. And if you determine or believe that there's some criminal activity that's taken place, that's when you send the report? Or
sometimes we'll refer it on to the criminal agency at that time. Other times we'll involve the criminal agency earlier on in the process, even before we issue a report, because we don't want to. There's certain legal restrictions. For instance, if I go and do an investigation, it could be that the things that are told to me in an administrative sense might not be admissible in a criminal case due to some Supreme Court jurisdiction or jurisprudence that's out there, rather. And so what we do is involve the criminal agency as soon as we're convinced that there's criminal violations. So usually, almost always.
You don't have to, or the prosecuting side of this this investigation really doesn't have to wait for the report or the governor or anything else. Once once you determine that there may be criminal activity, you're notifying the other appropriate agencies.
We believe it's prudent to do that just to make sure that we properly protect everyone that's involved.
All right. Well, let's talk about the fact that you, I think, said you had 16 folks. The legislative order has hundreds. You got this huge jurisdiction. It sure sounds to me like you might need more folks, and I know the legislature and governor's been supporting you. Tell me about that.
Well, we do believe, Locke, based on the complaint volume since I took this job, that we are going to need additional staff. However, we didn't feel comfortable going before the legislature in this session to ask for additional staff because we didn't have the numbers at that point to support that.
Just didn't have the information compiled.
Exactly. We didn't want to go with pie-in-the-sky projections. We wanted to come in with real, hard evidence of the complaint volume. And we've already more than doubled in the 4 months that I took this job, more than doubled the entire last year's complaint volume. And so we're actually projecting out to possibly quadruple that. And so obviously then at that point we can go to the legislature and say, here are the hard numbers. Let's see what we can do about getting us some more staff to make us able to properly and more effectively handle the number of complaints that are coming.
And how do you compile the data?
Well, what we do is every complaint that comes in any way, shape, or form is entered into a database. And then what we do is we track them just in terms of overall volume of complaint, and then the nature of the complaints, and then what's done with them. Sometimes we screen it and we figure, well, that's not in our jurisdiction. That's actually the legislative order, so we'll refer it to them. Or it may be a situation where we don't feel we have specific enough information, so we'll actually communicate to the complainant if we know who they are and let them know, hey, why don't you give us some more information. Other times, these are active investigations that result in the issuance of public reports.
Well, and let's talk about that, because reports have been issued in the past, and currently investigations are taking place. Tell the folks about most recent past reports that have resulted in, frankly, the saving of money, taxpayers' money.
Since I've been there, we've issued 2 reports, and there are a number of more in the pipeline that are going to be issued over the next month or 2. But we issued 2 reports, one involving the Louisiana State Licensing Board for contractors, and that involved a member of the contractor board that was holding up applications because the applicants owed money to his son's company. That was an ethics violation. We issued a public report on that and referred that to the Louisiana State Board of Ethics for further investigation. And we also issued a report involving improper use of state-issued Visa cards, which are also known as P cards, splitting up purchases, and just basically improper use of those cards.
Like they're trying to hide stuff?
There's a $1,000 limit on the use of these P cards, and sometimes if you're going to buy more than $1,000 worth of stuff, you just split the purchases up, go make separate purchases in order to get around the rules. And so we identified those trends and were able to shine the light of day on it. We've got, of course, the most recent thing to hit the press was a case where we have not issued a report, but because there was an arrest and it becomes a public record.
That was the State Police Commissioner?
It was a State Police Civil Service Commission employee, and it's important to distinguish that's not state police, totally different entities. So with all due respect to Colonel Edmondson, that has nothing to do with Colonel Edmondson's territory. This is the State Police Civil Service Commission. We had an employee that was using Visa cards to make personal purchases, large quantities. And so with the assistance of the Attorney General, they actually made a criminal arrest. And even though our investigation is ongoing and I can't comment on anything that's not public record, but that did make it, that did receive some press attention this week.
There's some other big investigations on it. Stephen, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it, and thank you for all the good work you're going to do. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Line. Stephen Street, the Inspector General for the State of Louisiana. Thank you for being with us.